The Darkest Christmas, Ronald Gene Simmons and the Arkansas Holiday Massacre. Welcome to Creepshow, where we dive into the most chilling true stories that blur the line between nightmare and reality. Tonight, we're taking you to Russellville, Arkansas, during the Christmas season of 1987, a time meant for joy, peace, and togetherness. But for the Simmons family and the people of Russellville, that season became one of the darkest in memory. This is the story of Ronald Gene Simmons, a man who shattered his own family and horrified an entire town. 16 lives lost, the result of one man's obsession with control and power. How could someone, a father and husband, turn a season of joy into a nightmarish reality? What forces and influences led Ronald Simmons to such unspeakable acts? Join us as we explore his life, his twisted psyche, and the events that led to what would be called the Christmas Massacre. Ronald Gene Simmons' life began without any signs of the horrors that would come. Born on July 15, 1940 in Chicago, Illinois, he was the second child of Loretta and William Simmons. But Ronald's life changed drastically before he could even understand it. When he was only 2 years old, his father, William, suffered a massive stroke and died. His mother, Loretta, was left to raise her young son and older child alone. It wasn't long before Loretta remarried. Her new husband, William Griffin, was a civil engineer with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, 15 years her senior. A strict, authoritative man whose influence would shape Ronald's view of the world and relationships. By the time Ronald was 6, his family moved to a remote part of Arkansas, near the Ozark Forest. It was a quiet, rural place, a setting that Ronald would always remember fondly as a place of peace and order. Here, he felt a sense of belonging and simplicity that would stay with him forever. But his time in this rural paradise was cut short. By the age of 10, the family relocated to the suburbs, closer to Griffin's work. This move shook young Ronald. Gone were the days of quiet solitude, replaced by the bustling, more chaotic life of suburban living. It was here that his personality began to harden. Ronald quickly developed a reputation for being controlling, especially with his younger siblings. He had a fierce temper, and he clashed constantly with his strict stepfather. For Ronald, authority was something to be resented unless it was his own. He was possessive, demanding, and by his teens, increasingly rebellious. Teachers, friends, and even family members saw the changes in him. His jealousy toward his siblings, combined with his need to be right, created frequent conflicts. At 17, Ronald surprised many by joining the U.S. Army. For someone who resisted authority, the military's rigid structure seemed an unusual choice. But for Ronald, it was a perfect fit, an environment where he could thrive in order, discipline, and control. The Army offered structure and rules, which Ronald embraced and used to his advantage. He excelled, rising through the ranks, and eventually found himself stationed at a naval base in Washington. It was here that he met 18-year-old Rebecca Ulibarri. Known as Becky, she had grown up with her own struggles, coming from a broken family and a childhood where love was scarce. Ronald represented something stable to her, someone disciplined, strong, and protective. They married quickly, and Becky soon became pregnant with their first child, Ronald Jr. But what began as a loving relationship took a dark turn. Ronald's need for control extended into every corner of their life. He monitored everything Becky did, from how she managed the home to every penny she spent. Soon, Becky found herself trapped, living in a prison of Ronald's making, unable to make even the smallest decision without his approval. As his military career progressed, Ronald re-enlisted, this time in the Air Force, where he took on administrative roles. His meticulous, authoritarian nature was well suited for clerical duties, and he quickly rose in rank. But his obsession with control continued to grow, manifesting in the way he treated his family. By the time they had 6 children, Ronald's home had become a place of fear and repression. He enforced strict rules, isolating his family from outsiders and restricting his children's freedom. Becky bore the worst of his anger, constantly criticized and degraded. His children, too, lived under his thumb, never daring to resist or question him. One of the most disturbing aspects of Ronald's personality emerged as his daughter Sheila entered her teens. He became fixated on her, displaying a level of attention that crossed every boundary of what was appropriate. To the horror of the family, Ronald eventually abused Sheila and even fathered a child with her. This revelation shattered whatever sense of normalcy remained in the family, but Ronald acted as though nothing was wrong. He even justified his actions as an expression of love, telling his wife and children that Sheila's pregnancy was something to be proud of. Ronald's eldest son, also named Ronald, was disgusted and wanted to report his father to the authorities, but Becky, fearful of what might happen, begged him to stay silent. In Ronald's household, secrecy was survival. Eventually, social services took notice, and Ronald was investigated. But before any action could be taken, he moved the family to a remote area of Arkansas. Ronald wanted complete control, and the property he purchased, which he called Mockingbird Hill, allowed him to keep his family isolated. With no phone and high fences surrounding the home, the Simmons family was effectively cut off from the outside world. Here, Ronald could maintain his reign of control without interference, leaving his family trapped and powerless. In the years that followed, the situation only worsened. Ronald's paranoia grew, and he became increasingly fearful of anyone who might disrupt his perfect world. As his children grew older, some began to resist, and the cracks in his control became more visible. Sheila eventually escaped, marrying a man named Dennis and starting a family of her own. This was a devastating blow to Ronald's ego. To him, Sheila's departure was the ultimate betrayal, a rejection of his authority and an assertion of independence that he couldn't tolerate. Losing his control over Sheila marked a turning point for Ronald. Combined with financial struggles and his own deteriorating mental state, this rejection filled him with a consuming rage and resentment. As Christmas approached in 1987, Ronald's anger festered. He felt his power slipping away, his carefully constructed world crumbling. The holiday season, a time for family and love, became the moment he chose to unleash his fury. In his mind, there was only one way to regain control: to destroy everything he had built and everyone he felt had wronged him. On December 22, 1987, Ronald Gene Simmons began what would become one of the most horrifying crimes in American history. That morning, after his younger children left for school, he attacked his wife Becky, striking her with a crowbar before shooting her. He then turned the gun on his eldest son, Ronald Jr., who had been staying with them, killing him in cold blood. But the horror didn't end there. 3-year-old Barbara, Ronald Jr.'s daughter, was in her room. Ronald went to her and ended her life too. With the first wave of murders complete, Ronald calmly waited for his younger children to return home. When they arrived, he greeted them with a warm smile, telling them he had an early Christmas gift for each of them. He led them into the house one by one, strangling each child in turn. Ronald's cold, methodical actions show a terrifying level of control. By the end of that afternoon, all of his children had been murdered. Their bodies lay in the home that had once been their only refuge, now transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. But Ronald wasn't finished. Over the next 2 days, he waited for other family members who were planning to visit for the holidays. When his son Billy, Billy's wife, and their young son arrived, they were met with the same fate. Ronald killed each one, showing no mercy. When Sheila arrived with her family, including her young daughter and infant son, Ronald murdered them as well. It was as if he was systematically erasing every connection to his past, every symbol of his own lost control. After killing 14 members of his family, Ronald calmly went about arranging the bodies, covering them with coats and blankets as if in some twisted act of respect. He wrapped the bodies of the 2 young boys in plastic and placed them in the trunks of abandoned cars on the property. For the next 2 days, he remained in the house, surrounded by the bodies of his family, showing no remorse and feeling no guilt. In his mind, he had taken back control, an illusion of power that now lay in ruins. But Ronald's rage extended beyond his family. On December 28th, he drove into the nearby town of Russellville, carrying a handgun and a cold determination. His first stop was the law office where Kathy Kendrick, a former co-worker, was employed. Ronald had harbored feelings for Kathy, but she had rejected him. To him, that rejection was a personal insult, another reminder of his lost control. He entered her office, pointed the gun, and fired multiple times, killing her on the spot. Ronald continued his rampage through town, targeting former employers and colleagues, people he felt had wronged him or stood in his way. At an oil company office, he shot Rusty Taylor, a former manager, critically wounding him, and killed another employee, Jim Chaffin, who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. His spree of violence left the town reeling, a community devastated by the actions of a man they had barely known. Finally, Ronald walked into a convenience store, sat down, and waited. When the police arrived, he surrendered without resistance. It was as if, in that moment, he no longer cared about the consequences. He had done what he set out to do, and there was nothing left. During his trial, Ronald Gene Simmons showed a chilling indifference. He confessed to each murder in graphic detail, showing no remorse. He refused any chance of appeal, instead expressing a desire for a swift execution. His trial concluded with a death sentence, which he accepted without hesitation. On June 25, 1990, he was executed by lethal injection, bringing an end to a life marked by control, abuse, and horror. For the people of Russellville, Arkansas, the memory of Ronald Gene Simmons' rampage remains a haunting shadow. 16 lives were lost in a matter of days, leaving families shattered and a community in mourning. The holiday season, once filled with joy and love, became a time of sorrow and loss, a reminder of the horrors that can hide behind closed doors. This story serves as a grim warning about the darkness that can live within those closest to us, the evil that can lurk behind a facade of normalcy. Ronald Gene Simmons left a legacy of terror, and his crimes remain a chilling example of how control and obsession can drive a person to the unthinkable. Thank you for watching Creepshow, where we uncover the darkest true stories that reveal the depths of human horror. If you found this story haunting, please like and subscribe for more tales that delve into the most disturbing sides of human nature. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight.